I've done 2 videos now on demons I'd love to see in Megami Tensei, and trust me when I say I've got enough material to do a heck of a lot more. But I've noticed a certain problem with those videos, and that's that they're all influenced by my personal biases. You're almost always gonna see birds, sea creatures, cryptids, ghost stories, and Hawaiian folklore because, yeah, those are all things that I really like. So today I wanted to mix things up a bit, and I'm going to be going over 10 demons that you want to see in Megami Tensei. I've scoured the comments from the past 2 videos and picked out some that I'd never have thought of or even heard of until now that, yeah, I agree, would make for amazing demons. Which means, of course, there's still some bias since I am the one that picked these out, but I can at least promise there aren't any birds this time. As always, the only rule I have is only 1 figure per branch of mythology, so with all that out of the way, let's get started. I'll go ahead and open things up with a figure that a lot of people have suggested, and one that I've considered including on these lists before anyway. That beloved figure of the holidays, Krampus. While many people view this peculiar demonic goat as an evil Santa, the truth is a bit more complex than that. In the Alpine regions of Austria and Germany, Krampus would visit children on December 5th, better known as Krampusnacht or Krampus Night, and warn them to be good, which I think is nice, give the kids a heads up to get their act together. Krampus would then travel with Santa as an equal partner on Christmas Eve and beat bad children with a birch rod, hoping the physical punishment would encourage them to be better for next year. The tales of Krampus mostly died down around World War I, but the story intrigues a lot of modern audiences who view the figure as a bit more exciting than Santa being a solo act who just drops off lumps of coal. Naturally, as a pretty big figure in both folklore and modern pop culture, it's understandable why many people think this would make for a distinct and endearing demon in the franchise, and I can't really disagree. Now, this next one is interesting to me because I had multiple people recommend the Benandanti, and almost every comment referred to this creature as a sort of Italian werewolf from the 16th century, which I admit I was immediately on board with because I think an Italian werewolf interacting with our pre-existing French werewolf would be amazing. Like, come on, you know they'd argue over who has the better food. However, as I looked into this myth, I realized there was far more to it than that. For starters, the Benandanti, which roughly translates as good walkers, is less about people transforming into werewolves, and more about the spirits of unique people leaving their bodies while they sleep to inhabit an animal, which could be a wolf, but could also be a mouse, a rabbit, or even a butterfly. While possessing the animal, they would use this form to challenge witches and other malevolent spirits to games where defeating them would usually result in healthier, less destroyed crops and harvests. The werewolf thing seems to come from an Italian historian named Carlo Ginzburg, who drew similarities between the Benandanti with the Livonian werewolf of 1692. The story of a Swedish man in his 80s who claimed he would turn into a holy werewolf and use this form to fight off witches and demons. While there are some differences in these stories, I understand where the comparison comes from, and frankly, I think either of them would be a welcome addition to the franchise. As far as I'm concerned, Lugaru has opened the doggy door for werewolves of any nationality to have their chance to shine. One of my favorite things about doing these videos is getting to hear people telling me about their favorite ghost stories from their homelands. Doubly so when they recommend stories from their homelands that they think I would like. A lot of people have suggested some fantastic pieces of folklore from South America, but one name that came up a few times that really piqued my interest was El Silbón, a ghost story from Venezuela and Colombia. Now, I was able to find a couple variations on the story depending on what region it comes from, but the main one I found told the story of a spoiled young man who lived on a farm. After his father failed to hunt a deer for dinner, the man killed his father and had his mother cook his organs for dinner. Upon discovering what he'd done, his mother cursed him and his grandfather lashed him before cleaning his wounds with chili peppers and lemon. The young man was then banished, forced to eternally carry a large sack containing the remains of his murdered father over his shoulder. He now wanders with the notable song that comes from his name, for El Silbón can translate as the Whistler. It's said that if you hear his whistling, it foretells your death, but in a unique twist, the louder his whistling appears to be, the safer you are. Despite the creepy tale, something I found intriguing is that in many cases, El Silbón seems to primarily go after bad people, choosing to kill violent drunks and womanizers, ripping them apart and throwing their bones into the ever-expanding sack he carries over his shoulder. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna move on before I start giggling at the fact that I just said ever-expanding sack. I've mentioned before that I'm a fan of myths with some real-world or historical context, so imagine the pleasant rabbit hole I fell into when a good friend of mine commented that I look into the vegetable lamb of Tartary, aka the Boramez. This is kinda what it sounds like, the belief in a plant that basically grew a living, breathing sheep from its roots. It turns out there are many historical records of these zoophytes, basically half plant, half animals, but this one is perhaps the most famous and has many different variations. Many tales state that the lamb was connected to the plant stem as if it was an umbilical cord and it could graze on nearby grass. However, once it ate everything it could reach, it would eventually starve to death. While some variations of the Boramez implied that it may have been the cotton plant, while others say the creature was tucked away inside of a gourd, the most commonly believed inspiration for the plant was a Chinese fern known as the Cibotium Boramez, which had a thick, fluffy rhizome similar in texture to a sheep's wool. And yeah, I definitely think that a half lamb, half plant would fit right at home in the series with other seemingly magical plants based on real-world sources, like the mandrake, or... Come on, at the very least, how is this thing not a Pokemon yet? Alright, you got me. I still love me some cryptids, and the Loveland Frog straight out of Loveland, Ohio is just too good of a beast to ignore. Look, on paper, I'll admit this one doesn't seem that exciting. He's a large frog-like creature about 4 feet tall who stands on 2 legs. There have been supposed sightings for several decades, with one of the biggest being in 1972, and... just look at this thing, I love it so much. He looks like when you catch your roommate stealing your last Diet Mr. Pibb at 1 in the morning. While the science hippies who try to ruin dinosaurs for everyone believe that the Loveland Frog was likely a large tailless iguana and people's eyes playing tricks on them, some stories also claim that it carries a magic wand, so try explaining that, huh? This cryptid is so beloved that it even became the official mascot of Loveland in 2023, where it appears more as a frog prince, complete with heart decorations, which I honestly think is a good look for this figure. I am always down for seeing more wacky cryptids in the franchise, just to try and help keep Mothman company. In my last video, I talked about wanting the African ghost story Madame Koi Koi in the franchise, and Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance has introduced a few new notable African demons as well. And thankfully, a few helpful comments recommended a few more that I've really enjoyed looking into, with one in particular being Yemoja, a powerful mother goddess in the Yoruba religion of West Africa. Aside from being a protector deity of women, particularly pregnant women, she's viewed as a major water spirit who watches over rivers and oceans, most notably the Ogun River in Nigeria. She's often depicted as a mermaid and is a maternal figure for all of humanity. I love me some powerful goddesses, especially figures associated with water, which, as I've said before, is one of my favorite elements. So, yeah, I would absolutely be down for her making a big splash in this franchise. This next demon is another one that multiple people mentioned, and... y'all, I don't know who came up with the Nuckelavee, but they should have a disorder named after them. I want you to picture a horse. Okay, now I want you to remove all the skin. No skin. Okay, now wedge, like, the also skinless upper body of a pissed-off human into the middle of its back. Now make it giant, and evil, and maybe give it a sword. And, oh my god, I love how much I hate this thing, and I want to thank everybody who suggested this monstrosity from the bottom of my heart. This demon apparently originates from the Orkney Islands off the northern coast of Scotland, and apparently it's supposed to be similar to a Kelpie, but instead of just being a talking horse that tries to trick you into riding it, nope, the Nuckelavee already has a rider, so it's just gonna drag you off kicking and screaming. It also apparently causes droughts, bad harvests, and plagues. This thing is just so freakishly evil that I can't help but respect it. I know I normally like to blend a little cuteness with my terrifying, but not here. This is just a pants-crappingly, awesomely disturbing figure, and it should have been a demon in this franchise years ago. Oh yeah, and if you really want to piss it off, apparently just burn some seaweed. Look, I'll admit that some figures just click with me, and I really only need to know 1 or 2 things before I am totally on board with them. Rainbow Anteater. Done. Sold. Make it a demon. Give it a unique conversation with your lunger. Do I even need to know that Kasogonaga is a Toba weather goddess in Argentina who appears to people who eat hallucinogenic plants, and that she can shoot lightning from her mouth? Well, yes, actually, because not only is all of that awesome, but it makes this video hopefully a little bit more interesting. Kasogonaga fell to Earth and asked a man to build her a fire so she could ride the smoke back up to the skies, where she eventually gifted him with the power of being a shaman. A few other tales describe her as an elephant or a pig, but as far as I'm concerned, no. Rainbow Anteater is the only way to go here. I'm always down for more folk heroes in Megami Tensei. We've had figures like Cucullin and Siegfried for quite a while, and SMT5 even gave us Fionn McCool, who I'm still mad at myself because, again, I'd had him as an idea for these videos long before he showed up in the franchise. I just never got around to making those videos until earlier this year. Anyway, there are plenty of other similar heroes from other regions, and one that was suggested to me was Gwydion, a Welsh folk hero who was not only a skilled fighter, but utilized magic and trickery in order to best his opponents. Many of his stories involve him tricking his sister, who is actually already in the franchise, Arianrhod. Gwydion isn't the most noble hero out there, and truthfully he did some pretty horrible stuff, but I think that's kind of what would help make him a unique demon, especially among other folk heroes. And closing out this list, of course we have another Hawaiian story, but hey, remember, all of these were ones that y'all suggested. The Huaka'i Po, also commonly referred to as the Nightmarchers, is a popular ghost story in Hawaii, one that I distinctly remember hearing around a lot of campfires as a kid. The Huaka'i Po are a legion of Hawaiian warriors that march along a specific path on nights honoring the gods. They're dressed for battle and wield weapons, beat drums, and sound their arrival with conch shells. Since they're ghosts, they can phase through direct obstacles in the way of their path, such as houses or other buildings. Now, normal people are not supposed to gaze upon the Nightmarchers, so they're gonna kill you if they come across you, unless you're fortunate enough to be the descendant of one of the warriors. The best way to survive an encounter with the Nightmarchers is when you hear their drums or smell the death in the air that they emit, get down on the floor and look at the ground. This shows reverence to the spirits, and they'll generally just leave you alone. I think in order to make the Huaka'i Po work as a demon, you can't just have a single marcher, and it would have to be something more like the Wild Hunt demon. But it's one of the most popular ghost stories of the culture, and yeah, I think it would make for a really fun figure all the same. Alright, so there we go, that's 10 myths that you'd like to see as demons in the Megami Tensei franchise. I'm sure I'll be back with more demon ideas in the future, but definitely let me know what types of myth or folklore you'd like to see in the franchise one day, because who knows, may just wind up being in a future video. If you're new to the channel and like this type of content, please consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.